So connotation. Connotation works quite often through the idea of metaphor and metonym. And what I'd like to do now is spend some time talking about metaphor and metonym and how they create meaning. So metaphor rather, is probably familiar to us. From our studies of literature, our studies of poetry, or if you've studied film or visual art somewhere previously, the idea of metaphor might be quite familiar to you. And really, it simply refers to a sign that represents something other than itself. So a metaphor expresses the unfamiliar through the use of the familiar. And because of that, because it expresses the unfamiliar through the use of the familiar, it simultaneously relies on similarity and difference in order to create meaning. Simultaneously relies on similarity and difference in order to create meaning. So here, in this photo, which is an ad for Durex condoms, we have the hard hat representing a metaphor, or serving as a metaphor rather, for the condom itself. So we look at that hard hat, and there are a set of connotations that come to mind when we look at it. It will protect you from danger. It will keep you safe. It is reliable. All things that we want in a condom, because that's why you're using it. You're using a condom in order to either prevent pregnancy, disease, or both. So the meaning of the hard hat works metaphorically to support the meaning of, or the connotations that we want attached, or that the advertiser wants attached to Durex condoms. Now, under most circumstances, visual metaphors do not draw attention to themselves as metaphors and are seen as natural. Now, that's probably not the case here. And in some of the examples I'm going to show for illustrative purposes, they're not particularly subtle, and there's nothing subtle about this Durex condom ad here. But under most circumstances, visual metaphors don't draw attention to themselves as metaphors, and we see them as natural. And as such, they're a very powerful way in which certain ways of seeing the world are made to appear natural. And that has ideological implications, and over the coming weeks, we're going to begin to question, using semiotic analysis, the ways in which the media represents the world as natural, or certain aspects of the world as natural, common sense, things that we should accept as given, when in fact there's nothing natural about them at all. So metaphor is a very, very important element of understanding the media's ideological power. Let's have a look at some more metaphors. Now, this is an ad for Accenture, which is a financial services accounting firm. So a firm that will do your, well, for companies at least, not individuals that will do their accounting, their taxes, all those sorts of things. Now here we've got a really, really curious, interesting, funny, but also powerful metaphor. So our elephant riding the surfboard. Now let's think of some connotations here. So when we think of an elephant, we think of something that's big, powerful, but also, a little bit clumsy. We wouldn't normally associate it with riding a surfboard. So here we have a juxtaposition between the elephant and the surfboard, and the elephant looks like it's riding the surfboard very happily. So here we've got that big, powerful, but also quite nimble, agile, athletic, energetic creature. Now that metaphor of the elephant riding the surfboard and all those connotations of power but agility at the same time transfer across to our understanding of Accenture as a financial services company, so that they're big and powerful, but they're also agile enough and nimble enough to be able to look after you and give you or your company the personal service that you need and desire. Now, it's a really fun and very clever way of representing those connotations, because let's face it, you know, an accounting firm, a financial services firm is kind of boring. And, you know, following the GFC, the global financial crisis in 2008, a lot of accounting firms, a lot of banks, a lot of financial companies, financial services companies didn't have very good reputations. So using an animal, behaving in a quirky, cute way also works metaphorically to suggest that this company is kind of fun, is kind of nice, is caring, because no one really has ill feelings towards an elephant or ill feelings towards animals. And that use of animals as a metaphor in advertising for companies that often cop a lot of flack is a very powerful one. You know, we kind of like intrinsically animals. We think they're cute, we think they're funny. So we're not very likely to look at an ad like this for Optus and think badly about the company, even though we may have had shoddy service from them. We get, you know, we've got poor internet connections, bad phone service, we've been overbilled, you ring their call center, you've got to stay on the line for 3 hours, all of those sorts of things. But the use of animals here, metaphorically, creates a suggestion that this is a gentle, kind, caring company, but also one that, if we look at the big elephant, is quite big, but it's a company that will look after the little people, the smaller animals behind it. So the use of animals, and you can see it in a range of ads for companies that cop a lot of flack, is quite a powerful metaphor. Here we have another metaphor which is about as subtle as the proverbial sledgehammer. So here we have a bottle of Sky vodka, very strategically placed over the crotch of this man, who, judging by the bits of body that we can see, is pretty fit. And the woman's hand placed on the bottle of vodka suggests that she's going to be using it or maneuvering her hand in a particular way. I'm trying to dance around the idea that this looks like the woman is giving the man a hand job, which of course that's the intention of the advertisement. So the bottle here very clearly represents a metaphor for this man's erect penis, and the connotations of sexual excitement, desire, power, that go into that sexual situation get carried over to the bottle of vodka. So the idea is that, you know, if you drink Sky vodka and you're a bloke, good things are going to happen to you. And that idea of the phallic symbol, so the bottle here is what's known in semiotic theory as a phallic symbol, a representation of male genitalia, is used to sell a whole range of things. So I'm not really trying to be deliberately smutty here. This is a very common strategy in advertising. You can't miss it, because it's certainly not very subtle, and we'll keep coming back to that idea, particularly in relation to food, and alcohol over the coming weeks in the semester. So there's another version of a metaphor in advertising. And here's our final one, and I've included this one because I just don't think it works. Well, for me, it doesn't. Anyway, I shouldn't say blanket that it just doesn't work. So it's a metaphoric representation of a fillet of fish, the McDonald's hamburger. So it's a fish tank or a fish bowl in the shape of the fillet of fish with a goldfish swimming inside. So the idea is that the goldfish represents a metaphor for the freshness of the hamburger. So, you know, this is a freshly made hamburger with fresh fish in it. And as such, it's something that you'd want to buy and eat. However, the problem for me is the choice of the fish. We don't eat goldfish. At least, you know, in Western cultures at least, we don't eat goldfish. I mean, I know carp, which is the bigger version of the goldfish, get eaten. But, you know, the idea of, for me at least, the idea of eating a goldfish is kind of gross. At best, it's sort of a dumb prank that people play. But the idea of, you know, the goldfish being part of your McDonald's hamburger, yeah, I'm not that okay with. It kind of makes me a little nauseous and grosses me out. So that's an example of metaphor that doesn't work for me at least. Yeah, big fail there from McDonald's. But there are elements of metonym in that previous photo of the ad from McDonald's there. So I want to pick up on the idea of metonym and explain how it differs from metaphor and how it works to create connotative meaning. So metonym, the idea of the metonym is this notion that a sign where a part is used to stand for the whole. So a part is used to stand for the whole of a text. So very clearly, there's a relationship here between the idea of metonym and the idea of the index. So metonyms work indexically. So the part refers to the whole. We spoke about that in relation to the index, the idea of the index, the sign, in the last podcast. So the selection is quite often arbitrary. The sign which is used to represent the whole is quite often arbitrary, but is made to appear natural and unquestioned. The selection of the sign which is used to represent the whole is arbitrary, but it's often made to appear natural and unquestioned. So let's have a look at this. Again, I've chosen food advertisements because food advertisements are rich in both metaphor and metonym. So let's have a look at these two. Again, we've got another Macca's ad, and I think this one works a little better here. So the chicken burger with the wrappers made to look like a chicken. We have this idea that the chicken stands for or represents the whole of the burger, and that creates the connotative meaning that it's fresh and it's something that we'd want to eat. Certainly that idea, I think, is cemented by the crumbs there. So the burger's just been eaten. The suggestion is there. So the use of the chicken to signify freshness, to signify naturalness. You know, McDonald's always gets criticised for being processed food, and there are all the sort of urban legends about the kind of junk that's in McDonald's burgers. But here, McDonald's are kind of responding to that by using the metonym of the chicken to represent the entirety of its burger. And here we've got the ad for San Remo pasta spaghetti and the wheat field. So we know that pasta, the main ingredient of pasta, is wheat. So the idea of showing the wheat field again, works metonymically to suggest, to create the connotative meaning that San Remo pasta is natural. It's made up of entirely of wheat. It's good. And you know, the slogan here, the tagline, the difference between good pasta and great pasta, helps us make that association between wheat and the quality of San Remo pasta. And we can also look more carefully at this ad, and you can see that in the cellophane packet, the clear part of the cellophane packet, where the pasta would normally be, we can see the wheat field in the background there. So again, that's helping establish that metonymic relationship that, you know, the wheat is just naturally part of the packaged spaghetti there. So that works, you know, that works quite powerfully to create a very important set of connotations which sell San Remo spaghetti as natural and therefore the pasta that you should choose. This is a great one. I just stumbled across this in my Google searching for various ads. It's a coffee company. I don't know where it's from, but I think it's great because it combines metaphor and metonym really well. So metaphor, we've got the syringe. So that alludes to the idea of our caffeine fix, our caffeine hit, drawing parallels with drug use, obviously. So that metaphor there works to create a set of connotations that this is powerful coffee, that this is coffee that's full of caffeine, it's going to give you the hit that you need, certainly that would appeal to a big audience because a lot of people use caffeine in that way to give them the boost, and I'll certainly put my hand up to that from time to time as well. So we've got that syringe working as a metaphor for the type of impact that the coffee will have on you, but then that's juxtaposed, I think, quite nicely with the coffee beans, just, you know, the little bunch of coffee beans there, the pile of coffee beans, which suggest naturalness. You know, they're untainted, they're natural. So you are getting a natural coffee hit. A natural coffee hit. So the metaphor of the metonym, I beg your pardon, the metonym of the coffee beans works very, very powerfully there to establish the naturalness. All this coffee is made up from is coffee. And if you drink it, it's going to give you a really powerful caffeine hit. So that was metaphor and metonym. What I'd like to do now is move on and begin wrapping up our podcast with a discussion of binary opposition and how binary opposition works to create cultural difference. So how does binary opposition work to establish cultural difference? And we're beginning to move on to sort of embrace and begin thinking about the political implications of semiotic analysis and how it can be used to deconstruct the media in a way that critiques it in terms of how it might represent certain cultural and social groups, and that will become apparent to you over the next couple of slides. But let's start with puppies and kitties to get us warmed up. Quite often we understand the meaning of a sign through how it relates to other signs. So we understand the meaning of a sign through how it relates to other signs. In other words, we know that a dog is a dog because it is not a cat. So we talk about cats and dogs almost in binary opposition to each other. Well, we do talk about them in binary opposition to each other. We know that a dog is a dog because it is not a cat, and we know that a cat is a cat because it is not a dog. So there we have the idea of binary opposition. The key to understanding binary opposition is that we're talking about either or categories. So a cat can't be part dog and a dog can't be part cat. Either or, mutually exclusive categories. Now the problem is that works quite nicely for cats and dogs, but most of everyday life isn't that clear cut. We've got some shades of grey going on here. But the media quite often relies on binary opposition to make sense of the world, to give us very clear-cut categories which allow us to make sense of the world. And these very clear-cut categories often appear to be natural, to be common sense, to be things that we don't question, these binary oppositions. Now, the problem is the world doesn't work like that. The world is full of shades of grey. There are very, very few either-or categories. So the media's reliance on binary opposition means that people and objects who don't neatly fall into those categories are seen to transgress cultural codes and conventions. So people who don't fit neatly into binary oppositions are seen to be transgressing the norm. They're abnormal, in other words. They're kind of outside of what we would consider to be natural and normal. And as a result, people who sit outside the binary oppositions cause cultural confusion, they cause cultural discomfort for people, and they cause outrage. Let's have a look at how that works practically. So we've got some powerful examples at the moment in public discourse. So we have a very, very important public discussion at the moment about the idea of gender fluidity, thanks to thanks to people like Caitlyn Jenner and the increasing visibility in public culture of transgender and intersex people. So the idea here is to demonstrate that our drag queen on the right kind of sits between the binary of male and female. You know, they're neither male, they're neither female. Biologically, I'm making some assumptions here that this person might be male based on the very impressive goatee, but they obviously, in this context at least, want to be seen, want to be identified as a woman. So they transgress that gender binary of male-female. And, even in this day and age, we get people who get very uptight and, very outraged by drag queens. So here we have, someone who is transgressing the gender binary. Now, continuing to focus on gender and sexuality, we can see the way in which the debates in Australia over same-sex marriage that culminated in 2017 with the postal vote asking citizens to indicate their preference for same-sex marriage or against same-sex marriage, and the subsequent passing of same-sex marriage into law. Throughout all those debates, at the heart of them lies the idea of binary oppositions in relation to gender and sexuality once again. So we could argue that much of the controversy from politicians and people opposed to same-sex marriage was around the idea that a man marrying a man and a woman marrying a woman transgressed that conventional and socially accepted rule that A man marries a woman and a woman marries a man. So the idea that two people of the same gender could become married transgresses those gender binaries that men and women are kind of polar opposites, and therefore anyone who plays with those boundaries, who kind of sits in between or challenges that idea that men and women are somehow fundamentally different, and that's what allows them to get married, that's what produced the controversy there. So let's think about gender binaries in a bit more detail. And this is an ad, or two ads rather, that from the UK, and they were very, very controversial. Received a lot of criticism for the way in which they stereotyped genders. So what I'd like you to do is make a list of all the binary oppositions that you can see in this ad. The obvious one is male is to female. So male is to female. So we've got the man, we've got the woman. What other connotations are going on here? So to give you a little clue, have a look at the slogan. So the man's slogan reads, "It's the smart thing to do." The woman's slogan reads, it's a pretty quick thing to do." So think about the connotations of smart and pretty, which are happily bolded for us, and how they fit into binary oppositions. So make a list of all the connotations associated with the man, all the connotations associated with the woman in this ad, and then make an evaluation about what they suggest in terms of gender. So again, take a moment to shut me up and have a look at this ad. This is again something that we're going to pick up on and explore in more detail. So make sure you do make a note and bring them to class. Let's do the same thing with this ad. And for some reason, I'm picking on British ads in this podcast. This is another British ad for a real estate company. And again, it was a very controversial ad. It was an ad that the company ended up pulling because of public complaints around the way it stereotyped black and white people. So again, make a list of all the connotations associated with the photo of the black guy, the black man in the photo to your left, and a set of connotations that we can attach to the white guy on your right. And once you've made that list and looked at them in binary opposition to one another, so obviously the overarching one here is black, white, or coloured person, white person, non-Anglo person, white person, Anglo person. And then from that, let's have a think about the ways in which the two people here are represented, the connotations that are attached to them, and why this ad might have been considered extremely offensive and extremely racist. To wrap up, we've covered quite a bit today, and we've gone over quite a bit of powerful work and introduced you to a number of tools that are really going to help you in the coming weeks to perform very deep, very rich and powerful textual analysis. So we started today with this idea that the way signs are arranged influences the meaning of a text. So we looked at syntagm and paradigm, or paradigm and syntagm. and how the various choices that we make influence the meaning of a text. And these meanings interact with our understanding of what is normal. So there's this idea of what is normal, what is natural, what is common sense, embedded in a lot of meaning that we take from media texts. And because of that, we need to be aware of how media texts shape our understanding of the world. So we come back to this idea that the media constructs reality. It doesn't shape reality, it constructs reality. And that's an important thing to think about. Because the media, or when the media's idea of normal helps to marginalize social and cultural groups, as we saw in the previous two examples, in the previous two ads, when it helps to marginalize social and cultural groups through sexism, racism, homophobia, textual analysis becomes an important tool for helping us identify that. So semiotic textual analysis can be used to critique the ethics and the social responsibility of the media in quite powerful ways. And that's what we're going to be working on and developing over the coming weeks, and also into the second part of the course. So thank you very much for listening. We've covered a lot of ground this week, a lot of crucial territory. We're going to be following up these examples both in our review activities and also in tutorials. So we're going to get really stuck in to some of these examples and other ones as well, and to give you the opportunity to really begin applying your understanding of these theoretical concepts. So I would recommend that maybe you have a listen to this podcast more than once to get your head around the ideas. The readings are, well, the two readings for this week are certainly going to help as well, as will the review exercises and the tutorials. So thanks very much, folks. Look forward to seeing you in class. Cheers.